this image of what my culture expected of me, in my understanding and usage of comparison is a thief of happiness. Maile is one of those plants that gives us identity. You don't just go giving alone Maile. Kula belongs to everybody. It's not mine. It is not ours. I love my Samoan culture even more because of Kula.
On this exciting episode of Dear Suga, what started with hula became something deeper. This is our first solo guest, Arnaz, Ifopo, a Samoa, Kumu Hula, and Banky professional. Let's talk story with Arnaz. This is exciting because you are the first sole on the podcast. So welcome, dear sole. I'd like to start off with a question as to who is Arnaz?
Love that. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be the first sole on Dear Sunga. So, who Arnaz Sale Kekela Ifopo is born in California, raised in Hawaii and Samoa. I was in Hawaii. My sister and my brother were born there, and then we actually moved to Samoa in the lovely village of Nu'uli. So, I hail from the village of Nu'uli, and my mother's from Vatia. So I would often also visit my mother's village. A lot of that foundational, where were you born, where were you raised, and those are the islands that shaped me. And so even when moving back to the continent, my parents were very, very big on our Samoa and knowing our Nu'u. I'm a Samoan through and through. The way I think, the way I move, the way I talk, everything always comes back to my Samoan identity. Now, where Kekela comes from is in high school. I've always been interested in culture. I've always been also known as one of those people that was always around the older people, right? The old soul, if you will. I loved everything about Hawaii when I first heard, it was Keli'i Show to be exact. We're at a Falavalave in Hawaii and just happened to hear Eo Mai. In Samoan, Eo Mai means you come, but in Hawaii is Eo Mai is like to respond back to me. And so there was a lot of similarities in the language that I was like, wait, I thought Hawaii was just a destination that we get to before we go to California. I never thought about Hawaii being part of Polynesia. So my Kekela identity, hula, became part of my persona in senior year of high school. One of my best friend's mom actually danced Halau, and that's where I was introduced. And I'm very, very fortunate to actually have my Hawaiian persona as well.
That's awesome. This week is a Flag Day in American Samoa. So I don't know if you got a chance to watch the Fautasi yesterday. Bo from the village of Pakia came in first. And then the second heat, Nu'uli won, Manuelita Sala. So I guess we're here. You're definitely representing the Sole from American Samoa.
Absolutely. I was not able to watch it because I was at work, but I was able to see the results. A lot of my family was posting, and I have the luxury of representing both villages, as most people do, but both of my villages actually placed first. So best of luck. I know there could only be one victor today. I know the final two heats are going to happen. So best of luck to both Manulele, Tausala, and Fua'o.
And by both because,
I still remember one year when I played in full pound recruited, and but I do have one of my grandmother's sisters moved and lives in Aua, so we will rep for Paipaiulupo'o. I will give you that.
your Samoan is impeccable. It's amazing because growing up in the diaspora, you're not exposed to the language as much. And I'm curious because I know there's a lot of people that want to learn the Samoan language. Maybe with your upbringing and how you were raised, to have that strong Samoa instilled in you.
I credit my parents for everything and who I am today. There's this common feeling when you move away from the islands, like, okay, we got to embrace, the American way. And we always kind of question it internally, of course, because you can never speak up against your parents, yeah? When we moved to the continent back to California, my parents made sure that we spoke nothing but Samoan at home. We did understand why, because they told us. They said, "Umakumakua o e koe a ʻole ngā nganga mana kungu'u." So to me, that really pointed to your whasingomanga as a Samoan. Samoan on the tū, on the savali, on the tautana. We're very big on that. So we're fortunate to have parents that instilled that very, very early on and live by the old way. Begrudgingly, my siblings hated it, but hopefully they appreciate it now. But I've always appreciated it because it gives us so much to hold on to and so much to be proud of, because with language unlocks so much more with our culture and other cultures as we're looking to connect. I appreciate that. I think that's one of the imposter syndromes that many of us have that live outside of Samoa or moved away, right? Is how is our Samoan? Is our Samoan going to continue to be as strong as it is back home? So in certain situations, I'm like, okay, makamudi, only because, especially when it comes to the Pa'alolo talk or the chiefly talk, it's because like we hear, we understand it, but in practice, I always feel very okema pe makamuni because of the fact that I would love to be as strong in my understanding and usage of nganganga fa'amakai. I'm always thinking in Samoan practice. I always look at, and there's many times where I think about the Samoan word and I can't translate it into English. So I would have to go look it up. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I meant. Or when someone says something and I'm explaining it in Samoan, I'm like, there's no real word in English that it translates into. It's like an idea, an ideology, or an encompassing thing. So always practicing. We are always taught that when you come upon a Samoan or if you are introduced to a Samoan, you always speak Samoan, especially the elder. But sadly nowadays, a Samoa aku ako ngangumai pe whaaparangin mai. So for me, it's I still give them that respect. And if they don't want to continue our discourse in Sangangana, then I will definitely carry on in English. I think it's very important to know our language.
I think so too. And I'm starting to recognize, like you said, there's some of us that might understand it, but also find it difficult to speak it. For me personally, it's my Korean. I can understand Korean enough, but I am so intimidated to speak in Korean just because I feel like I'm going to enunciate a word incorrectly. So that's how I've learned to encourage and try to understand when people speak Samoan is that they're trying. And so you are very involved too in the community work as an officer for Lingafa, which has done a lot of great things. And I know that they also have this amazing program for children. I see that lately on Instagram. It's just nice to see how it has evolved. How do you see the growth of Lingafa and where it's projected to go?
I love that. I love that. Be it the Faifeau's house or to the church, because that's where the Faletua and helpers would actually teach the kids on the Samoan, you know what I mean, the be and everything else. Seeing that, growing up that way, I always wished that there was a program. And there was a couple churches that tried to do it. I enrolled my kids in it, where for the summer, they were integrated into our Samoa, immersed in our Samoan language. And so when I happened to come across Lengafa on Instagram, I was like, wait, what? I didn't even know that Auntie Kawai, as I know her, was a president at the time. And we happened to be celebrating something. And she looked over and said, you're in banking. I'm looking for a treasurer. I'm like, what? And so she said, Lingafa. I was like, wait, how are you connected to Lingafa? She's like, I'm the president of Lingafa. I was like, stop right now. I think there's no such thing as a coincidence because things are all meant to be and happen the way that they should. So things and events happen when they're supposed to, and right time, right place. And it was there that I got involved with Lingafa. I was asked to be a treasurer, having finance background. And in my onboarding, I was asked if I was interested to become a board member as well. I was like, I would love giving back to my Samoan community. With the Hawaiian person, I felt like I was giving a little bit more to the Hawaiian community, and something that my parents always said when I was dancing hula, "O le ane ke alu e whaifuaia, ia siwa mangungu o iskangaka aere." And so for me, that always is in my head. And when that opportunity came about, it was such a huge honor. Of course, I said yes, because I want to make sure that our language survives, that our language continues to grow. And to answer your question, like, where do I see the growth and the projection or trajectory of Lengafa? So many great things coming. We hit a snag with COVID, but I think with COVID, it allowed us to reach the masses because it introduced Zoom in this virtual platform where we can get more people involved. So I think the trajectory is amazing. We're taking our first trip, little sneak peek, taking the entire staff to Samoa this year, taking us back to our roots. So it's really exciting to connect the dots for some of our diaspora.
I'm going to put a little shout out to Moni because Moni has been there also from the start and I'll make it grow.
He is at the helm, and there's some great things that are happening with Lingoff at the moment.
And I love that. There's so much topics that you just brought up. I definitely want to touch on your financial background, but I just want to stay on the topic of hula. I had reached out to Auntie Audrey because I knew the Merry Monarch Festival was in April, and I wanted to celebrate hula. My kumu was Pohakalani Manga, and I learned so much from her. So with Auntie Aubrey's blessings, she definitely connected us. My own experience is that it's actually through hula that I learned to appreciate more of my Samoan culture. Give us a sneak peek into it because I think that's the misconception sometimes is like, why are you going to do something else when you should be learning your own culture? So could you talk a little bit more about that experience and what led you to have such a big passion for hula?
Absolutely. And thank you for recognizing the similarities that we had or have. I love my Samoan culture even more because of the love I have for hula and Hawaii. To see what has happened to our Hawaiian brothers and sisters, to have their culture taken away from them, language was discouraged, it was basically beaten out of them. But because of what we have through Hawaii, they've notated everything. There are no boundaries when it comes to certain things that in Samoa would be delineated, like making siapo or weaving. Those are all things that are historically done by the women of our culture. Because of Hawaii or hula, it's opened that up for the rest of us to learn. So I attribute a lot of the longing to learn more about my culture. Like I find myself doing a lot more deeper research about Samoa because of what I've learned from hula. Because in hula, you learn to research and not just research what the foreigners brought over, not what the colonizers taught us, but our kamaaina that have written things. Because again, we come from a very oral culture. We had no written culture. So that's why when the missionaries came or some of these colonizers, they believed that we were not as advanced as a culture because we didn't have anything written. But as you continue to read some of the writings by some of these early reverends, George Brown, George Turner, Augustine Kramer, a lot of these people that have come over to Samoa, they saw how developed and how advanced and sophisticated Samoan culture is. There's not a lot that you can find. It was either burned down or gotten rid of because you were considered a heathen if you continue to believe in these things. And so again, because of Hawaii and what the work they've done, it's really motivated me and given me some of the tools to look for some buried manuscripts. There's so much about our culture we've just let go because we've become accustomed to this new way of life. And they call it, we're pongisa. Back in the days, like, why were we in the dark? And who determined that? I stopped hula for a little bit because my parents were really pushing me to just continue my Samoan practices versus anything outside of our culture. But I'm grateful, grateful, grateful that I stuck with hula. And even more so, had the opportunity to uniki formally as a Kumu Hula in 2022, opened my Halau in 2023. And in Halau, I have almost every island represented. I have Fijians, Tongans, Samoans, Hawaiians, they're the keiki. And so for me, it's ever more important that I teach not just Mo'omeheo Hawaii or Olelo Hawaii, but I also teach how it ties into Samoa, Tonga, the roots, right? Like I teach how all the words are the same. I teach how we do things maybe slightly differently or maybe just the same. And there are some other scholars out there that spoke on the fact that what one island forgot, another island remembers. And so we're at this kind of pivotal moment where we're resharing and reteaching what may have been left behind, like when Samoa went to some of these other islands when as we were navigating, right? And we left certain things behind that maybe we don't do anymore. And so, like even fangu fangu, that was one thing that I can kind of point to, right? So there's the nose flute in Hawaii. I know Tahiti has it, Tonga has it, and Samoa had it. That was the only way that we could wake up our ali'i because their couple was so big, so they were forbidden to be touched. And so you would wake them up by playing a nose flute, right? So those things, like tying it in that it's not uniquely one or the other. We are one people.
Yeah.
Our languages are all the same. And so that's where Hawaii, Samoa, like that interconnectivity.
There are things that are very different in our cultures, but there's so much similarities, like you had mentioned. One thing that I learned from Hawaii that I still practice these days, and I love that you're in nature. It's similar to Samoa in a way, but then when you go and pick a flower, you ask for permission from the tree and say, "Could I please pick you?" That's very important. But even in our Samoan culture, you have to go and whāngoia and you have to ask. And so, even though our differences is probably we're asking the people who own the land, but I also still do that in the Hawaiian culture, which is asking for from the plant because the plant has life. Everything has life.
Absolutely. I cannot agree more. And I tell people all the time, talk to your plants. I teach my students, if you want a place to practice your chants or your hula, The plants. The beautiful thing about plants is they are great listeners. They don't talk back, but they will show you their appreciation. So the more love that you give them, and if you think about giving them the environment to grow, they will grow. I'm sitting underneath the cocoon tree. We call that the lama. We used it for light back in the day, right? And for ink. So sitting underneath our coconut tree for that. But Maile to me is one of those plants that gives us identity. You can only find Maile in the Polynesian islands, right? You can't find it anywhere else. Maile is indigenous. It's endemic to our islands. Growing up, we always know that if it's a special occasion, you get a ulala Maile. Nowadays in Hawaii, it's just much more prevalent, and I teach my haumana the importance of not over harvesting. Right? Erofo in Manukapa'ofia, you're essentially going and you're raping the land if you're taking too much. People don't know how to gather. People don't ask for permission. And so for me, it's don't take from the land what is not yours. So if you didn't ask for the permission, it's going to show in the quality of your lei. The lei will respond accordingly. But I've learned to grow Maile out here because outside of the islands, no one thinks that you can grow Maile. And I have been growing Maile for almost 2 decades now in California with the weather that we have. And it's going back to if you give it the microclimate that it needs, if you give anything living the climate that it needs to thrive or survive, it will thrive and survive.
I agree. That's so beautiful. And Earth Day is April 22nd. A lot tied into our conversation today. It made me think of a memory of my mom getting ready for my high school graduation. And, everyone gets those beautiful leis from a store. And my mom didn't have her job, had put together a lei for me. At the time, I wasn't appreciative of it. Now, looking back, it's like the love and care is so much more special.
Aw, bless your mom. And her mana wasn't it.
Yes. Yes. So you have a halau, and I didn't realize the process that goes behind becoming a kumu. And so this is just me being the devil's advocate. You being Samoan, did you get any feedback of how are you stepping into this space that isn't really your blood connected to it?
I think most of those was self-inflicted, to be quite honest, because a lot of my Hanai family that are Hawaiian never looked at it that way. They looked at it with such gratitude that someone with no kokohoi would take on that mantle. When I say self-inflicted, it's because as Samoans, we're always so mindful of the spaces that right? That we occupy, that va that we're stepping into, right? It is not ours, right? It's not mine. But the beautiful thing about Hawaii is they say pula belongs to everybody. Same thing that we say in Samoan, it's the language. It's not a single person's language. Samoan language belongs to everyone. Samoan culture belongs to every Samoan, right? E kusape, be afa, it doesn't matter blood quantum. Or Samoa, it is your whāsinumanga. And so I look at that, and that's again a similarity that I see within the Hawaiians welcoming me into that space. The only time as I was kind of going through my uniki rituals or rites to become a kumu was when I was learning a chant. I was selected to do a chant, and my kumu said, "Make sure that it doesn't sound Samoan, that it sounds Hawaiian." And again, I had to internalize that, and I'm like, what does that mean? We sound the same. Like when I speak Samoan, when I speak Hawaiian, when you hear Ni'ihaoan speak, I understand Ni'ihaoan like when they speak it because it's very similar to Samoan speaking. So what does that mean? That was kind of maybe the first and only time that I've ever run across that whole make it sound Hawaiian, don't make it sound Samoan. That still sticks with me today because I'm mindful of, do I sound Samoan when I speak Hawaiian? When I olelo Hawaii, do I sound Samoan? I'm like, I don't know. And so it's definitely within the ear of the behold, but I've never been told otherwise by any Kanaka that it sounds Samoan. Maybe there's some nuances, like we hear certain people when they olelo Hawaii, but again, being such a traditionalist, I like it to sound Maui. If there's not that Maui sounding pronunciation, I teach my students, I don't want to hear you pronouncing it, an A as an E. Yeah, so like when they say haole versus haole or I'm like, are you hungry? No, it's I. You know what I mean? The letters are and e. It's I, it's not I. Yeah, so it's like those little things, but you hear a lot of halau. And again, in Hawaii, they say, "Oh, he pauka ike ka halau ho'okahi." I get it. We say the same thing in Samoa. Ese fale a onga. So it means maybe it's a little different, but it may not be wrong. Maybe they have a reason for why they do it that way. Different villages, different islands do things differently all the time. We have different versions of the same story. So knowing that, and I think that's what keeps us humble as Polynesians, is just because you learned it a certain way doesn't make your way the right way. It just means you just know it that way. And so those are the things. Hearing other Halau say, "I," very confident. I'm like, good for you. If that's what you were taught, Maika iloa. But for me, how I teach my homana is pronouncing it correctly because I want you to think back to when our ancestors were alive. You know what I mean? We had very, very pure vowels. You know what I mean? There's not this mixing with English sounds like, right? So those are the things that I am constantly on my homana about because I would hold myself to the same standard. Language is important, and saying the wrong thing, like you mentioned earlier, tone is everything. Also, pronunciation is everything. Because if you say the wrong thing in our language, can mean a bad word. You know what I mean? And as it pertains to hula, is you're calling upon some of these spirits or some of these ancestors that we really don't know how we're practicing. So make sure that you're not calling upon them and you don't know how to send them back. I love that through Hawaii, I'm able to learn some of these things and we're able to tie some of our Samoa, our culture back to that. Like, why do we do certain things?
Yes. The reason why I asked is because it is through hula, the concept of hanai is a big thing. I wanted to kind of bring that up because, especially with our Samoan audience, just to be aware of that. So thank you for assisting that. So you double Halau names are very important. So maybe you can share where you came about with the name of your Halau.
The name of my halau is Na ʻOhu Maile o Kula Moku. So the mist of the Maile of this land. I touched on Maile because it's so important and it means a lot to me because it is identity. When we think about Maile, you can only get Maile in our islands. So that to me was already identity. Going back to your story about your graduation, I remember graduating junior high and my parents getting Maile. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even graduate high school yet and I'm getting a Maile. That's how important Maile is to our people. And to know that Maile is the most ancient form of lei. It's one of the most ancient form, is probably the first form of lei was the Maile. So again, tie back to our islands. And then Okula Moku. So we're not technically an island, but as islanders, we think about Moku. Like even on island, your Moku, your Ahupua'a doesn't necessarily just mean your island, but also just like your subdivision of this land. And so I took that to mean that regardless of where we plant our feet, we are still the essence of our ancestors. In coming up with the name, I wanted to make sure that it was culturally appropriate as well. I asked in the Ihoan and we talked to some ideas, or this is what I'm looking for, this is what I want to, and everything was born out of that conversation, right? And so Na ʻOhu Mailo Kula Moku really spoke to me because in the study of hula too, that ʻOhu, that mist, has so many different meanings. Water is that life-giving source. Like without water, we won't be alive. The sun will make things grow, but without water as humans or plants, we talk about it, without water, wouldn't be here. But that mist also means that what you learn, you don't just share at large. Whether it's in Hālau, we're not so willing to give our knowledge. Other things we're willing to give freely. Growing up, it was you either sit at the heels of the elders and listen and learn, or when you're being taught something, you never ask questions, right? I would not fathom to ask a question back in the day because pasasai poinguku, you know what I mean? And I teach my students the old way and the new way. I tell them, like, you guys are very fortunate because the way that I grew up in Halau, you don't ask questions, right? But I want to foster knowing that things have shifted a little bit with this new day and age and these new generations. I wish that our people were a little bit more open in discussing certain things because we'd have way more information, especially for our own people, even if they give to us. I remember anytime I asked my parents for anything, like for research or for ngafa, it's always why? Why do you want to know? It's not like one of those, oh my God, I'm so glad that you're asking. So that's where it is important that we do your research and that knowledge that's being passed on, don't take it for granted. That name out so many different layers of we are proud of who we are. We're representations of our ancestors, of our islands, and stewards of our lands. But also what we learn, we don't just openly share without knowing people's intentions. What are you going to do with that information? Just because you want to ask, or are you asking because there's a point behind that?
You're actually making me think because these days, especially, we always want the glamour, the look of the colorful lei, but the maile, because it seems so simple, but there's so much meaning. And it's the same word in Samoan, but it's maile too. So maybe you can share more. What the power behind a Maile that people don't commonly know?
You have to know what it looks like. There's many times I ask Homana, who has ever seen Maile in the wild? They've only seen it in its finished form. They know it by its fragrance, and like that it's valuable. You know that it has this fragrance, but they don't know how to go gather Maile. You have to know where to look. Where does Maile grow? When I took my kids back home, Samoa to Kukuila in 2019, right before the world shut down, my kids wanted to go to one of the waterfalls in Nu'uli. So here goes my kids thinking, because growing up on the continent, they thought it was as easy as getting in the car. There's some trails. You got Right? You have to know where to go or you're gonna get lost in the forest. Where we go over the mountain, through the woods, and we finally get to the waterfall. And as they are actually swimming, I'm actually exploring. Samoa has two different varieties of Maile, whereas other islands only have one. And so in Hawaii, the type of Maile that they have in Samoa, we call that ngau. So the variety of Maile is smaller, but in Samoa, we have Alexia bracteolosa, which is Arlau Maile, which is the longer big-leafed one. So they look like mango leaves because they're so big. And then Alexia stellata, which is what we call in Samoa ngau, but everywhere else in the Pacific, they call it Maile. It's how beautiful that we have two varieties of Maile in Samoa. The importance of Maile is you don't just go giving alone Maile. You don't, because it is hard to find. You have to know where to go find it. Not every village has lau mailes, whereas some of the other stuff that's readily available, like plumeria with roses, pikake, some of these other flowers we call posamo, the tiare. Those things that we make ula from, we take for granted because it's readily available. Lau maile doesn't just grow in your backyard. Well, it doesn't matter. For someone to go climb the mountains to get the lau maile just to actually make you a lei, that's a huge honor. When something is being made by hand, the only person that truly understands what went into that is the person making it. And it should be the person receiving it, or if they've been exposed to it. Like if they've seen how an ula is made, it's love.
Yeah.
It is all love that goes into that because I'm doing it for a purpose. Right? It's not just, I'm just making this just go make money. Can, but we take pride in our work. You're not just going to whakafuru something and just make it look whatever. Like there's such artistry that goes into how you make an ula. Each time I smell maile, it's such a nostalgic smell. It always transports me back to a time, to a place. It's always back home. I'm already envisioning it and wishing I could smell it. Right?
It's easy for us just to go to a store and grab a lei, and it's something to learn to appreciate because it takes time to make that. And so Kula taught me that. I'm so appreciative for her as a mentor she has passed on. It's great that I can have this conversation because I'm so grateful to her. And I'm sure, with your experience going through being cool, it must be very rewarding for you. So I commend you for the work that you do to get to where you are. So I mean, you are a sole of many things. You're halal. You are doing community work, also background finance. You're working for an airline. I think we should have a part two of our conversation. You have such a drive. How do you balance your life? I'm barely here going to go figure out all these things, but where do you get the energy? Like, what inspires you to do so much?
I'm inspired by our ancestors, our parents, their drive, them moving away from their homeland to give us a life. That's my motivation. If I'm breathing and my limbs work, then I want to make sure that I put that to good use. Also, the reason why I do what I do is because I don't want people to have excuses. We hear it all the time, and whether it's valid or not, that's for the person to sit with on their own. But for me, if I can be a beacon, an example, like I don't want to hear someone say, well, I can't, or I don't have time. You think I have time? But look, I've worked in banking. It'll be my 20 years next month. The airline 10 years in June, and community work I've gotten involved with. I'm on year 3 or 4 now, but I love community work. We as Polynesians have done a lot of community work through church, through some of the groups that we're involved with. So it's kind of a lifetime thing for us. That on top of doing things that I love doing. I picked up weaving. We're never taught weaving. I want to learn how to weave because I want to make sure that that art does not die. It doesn't die with the old women, right? I'm glad that there's kind of a resurgence back home. And I see that there's a lot being done in New Zealand, right? They have whalelalanga, that they're teaching the younger generations how to weave. I want to learn. so that way I can pass it on. Doing all these things is to show the younger generation that an excuse is just that. Don't make it an excuse. If you have air in your lungs, if you are able-bodied, find time. There's always time to learn something or to give back somewhere, somehow. We're always students. Just because I reach the level of kumu does not mean I stop learning. You're always a haumana. In community work, there's always someone doing something more profound. But what I've learned too is stop comparing. Comparison is a thief of happiness, because if you're constantly comparing yourself to someone else that's doing something, you're always going to think that you're less than or you're not doing enough. And I hear that from my siblings, because being the eldest, and my parents always would, my poor sisters would always compare, like, why can't you be more like your brother, or why can't you do this? Or when they're out in the community and they find out that I'm their older brother, they're like, oh, you're Arnaz's sister. For the longest time, they didn't have names. It was Arnaz's sisters. So those are things where I tell them, get involved, right? The more involved you are, the more you give back. And it's not for accolades, but it's truly for, one, self-gratification that I'm making an impact. I'm leaving something behind worth leaving behind. Two, I'm truly interested in knowledge. Knowledge is power. Our ancestors knew it. The more you knew, but also having humility, not just throwing it around that you could do this, you could do that. Like, move in silence. Let the work speak for itself. There's so many different layers to our personas. You want to be proud of what you do, but at the same time, like, how can I continue to stay humble, stay rooted? One way to stay humble is keep yourself busy, because you don't have time to do anything else when you're busy. There's often times I'm like, oh, I'm tired, but I have this. And so I think about people who can't. And so that's kind of my motivation in keeping me going. And some of the things that I'm doing is, until I'm unable, then I'll stop. But while I have the ability to, I'm going to give, because there are some people that are unfortunate that want to give, and they're giving their all. And again, stop comparing. Right? And I learned about this word, or this phrase, imposter syndrome, like literally a year and a half ago. And now I use it like it's going out of style. Explains so much about how we feel in certain spaces, right? And the degree of imposter syndrome that one feels depends on where you are, right? Or depends on the day, right? And it changes day by day, right? There's no set, like, level. I love that there's a concept, and going back to our language, like, there's some words that you can't translate, but I love that that encompasses how we feel in certain aspects, because I still feel like I'm not doing enough. Here I am talking about don't compare yourself to someone, but I often do, because there are people that are doing more. And that's more of a challenge for myself. Okay, well, they're doing it, so why can't you?
Matthew McConaughey's Oscar speech, where it's like the person I'm really competing is the 10-year version of me in the future that I want to continuously be. I think it's just we grew up being compared to someone else. So there's that expectation and things like that. But I love that you can stay grounded. And there's an element of gratitude that I'm hearing from you as well. It's like the ability that I'm still able to do things. So I should be grateful for what I have and just being able to do it. So I absolutely love that. Gosh, there's so much we could talk about, but I wanted to get mindful of the time. So, you being involved in so many of these things in terms of finance, I feel with our Samoan culture, there's always a giving, giving, giving kind of thing. And so, if we're supposed to build something for ourselves, and at the same time, it's our culture to be giving, can you share with us how you make all of that happen financially?
I feel like that's a struggle that every someone goes through, like, even myself, like, as financially stable as I'd like to call it, we're constantly battling that whole, because there's always love it that come up. That is a non-negotiable for us. And how do I balance it? I don't know that I have an answer for that, because I'm still finding my balance. Because there's many times where the financial literate part of me is like, no, I'm going to set my boundaries. And so I think understanding what our duty is, going back to, we have the privilege. If we have it, my parents always said, and it's always stuck with me, "I'll coop it." You know what I mean? It's just money. And it also makes me think about what Jesus said in the Bible, right? Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Money is one thing, but the underlying message is it's our duty to take care of our familial responsibilities, whatever that looks like, whether we disagree, because we could all disagree on the amounts, because I feel like it's exponentially just getting more and more with each fall of love. It's like, okay, well, you need this amount. I'm like, what? It's like, where did that number come from? But how do I balance that? I think it's just being mindful of what I can and cannot give, but also making sure that you set yourself up early on so that you can be comfortable. And I think that's where a lot of our people, our community, they suffer from because they give because that's just in our DNA. But where do you give from when the well is empty? You can't give when you're empty. You can't pour from an empty cup. And so I think it's if you set yourself up early on and sticking to that and not allowing that the social or cultural pressures, like we have so much pressure that we live by as adolescents growing up or as Samoans, whether you're young or old, we still have a lot of pressures that our family puts on us, expectations. And so making sure that you understand how to set a budget, making sure that you move quietly and you just do. Stop waiting for someone to tell you what to do. Seek the help. I think that's another thing that our people have is pride. We have too much pride when it comes to certain things. I get it. Like there's certain things that I will never ask for help because if I can do it or if I could figure it out, I'm not going to ask for help but then it is that pride that will kill us in every situation. That's going to be our undoing is if we cannot, because our people too taught humility. Take that low road, take the humble road about everything. Like don't think about what someone else is going to say. Don't think about what they're going to look at because of the fact that I'm in finance, right? Because I have reached a certain kulanga within the bank. But to me, again, it's all to serve our people. It's all to be an example to the younger generation that you too can rise to a certain level. Don't let the color of your skin, what's being said, or don't let what you've heard deter you from continuing to strive for the top. Do so lovingly and do so humbly, but set yourself up where you set yourself apart. I lead in the corporate realm. I lead with my Samoan-ness. No matter where I am, I talk about it. My employees, I remember when customers would come in, their opening conversation would be like, "Oh, our manager is from Hawaii or from Samoa. He lived in Hawaii." That opens up so much conversation because people that visit our islands know us to be very hospitable, know us to be very loving. So use that to your advantage. Use that to create a seat at the table for yourself. If there's no seat or if you don't think that there's a seat, that there's a seat there. You just have to make sure that you create one for yourself. You have a voice, use it. And I always say, lean on the knowledge of our ancestors. Lean on them. We represent so much more than ourselves. And stepping into many different spaces, especially in the finance realm, where I know it may seem that our culture and our communities don't have that down, right? Because we're just so giving. Set yourself up, right? Do it early on, do it unapologetically, and do it within kind of the parameters too, where you're still giving, right? Don't say no, right? Because we can't say no. I know many times we do, or we try to, and it becomes overwhelming, but I always hear my mom too, "O fa manguianga ngā oe." You will always be blessed because of it. And I think about that. It's our duty, it's our responsibility. Give where you can and don't be ashamed if you can only give 100 or 200. Our people will never ever give a certain amount. Like whether an amount is set, give what you can because it's still better than zero. And if you don't have money, contribute some other way. Go help out with Fa'alavalavas and don't shy away from going to a Fa'alavalava because you think that it's all because of money. No, that's where you get to meet new family. You get to hear stories that you may never heard. We have the ability to do so much as a community if we were all of the same mindset. There's definitely an opportunity for people to have some financial literacy workshops. I know I've been tapped on the shoulder a couple times to maybe host some and not opposed to it, but I want to allow people the space to come to that realization. What do they need help with? And coming to some of these workshops or asking for help doesn't mean that I'm going to give you money, right? Like, and I think that's kind of like the misunderstanding is if I go to this workshop, they're going to teach me how to be a millionaire. And so they give up because it's something that they don't think that they can stick to or that they can do.
I love how you talked about in terms of giving. I think right now, especially in our Samoan culture, it's definitely keeping up with the Joneses, you know? Oh, who's gonna Sealy or who's gonna do this? My mom's always taught me your richness and your wealth is your family. My niece is passing recently. I'm in a working transition, but I'm so glad that I was there. You can contribute your time and energy, and it made so much more too. And so I want to just encourage that, especially within our Samoan culture, the basic fundamental is being there is important. Es waso al waso, you know, there will be days where you can't give and there will be days where you can't, but you're able to be there for each other. That's what's most important.
Right? I agree. Money comes and goes, right? I think going back to what my parents said is money comes and goes, but you can never get back the time that you lost. And so those situations, you can't get back that time. You can't say, "Oh, I wish I was it. Well, shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? But
Yeah.
money you can always make. Time, you cannot create time out of thin air. So take the time, get with your family. No, a lot of our younger generation, they shy away from it because they see what happens. They hear, "Karana fai," you know what I mean? It be your own family sometimes that cuts you down. But again, are you doing it for that individual or certain individuals, or are you doing it because it's your duty? And then I think that's where shifting your perspective, and I love listening to people when they vent because they trust you enough to listen. Then I always offer that perspective that, hey, I see where you're coming from, but shift your perspective. While that can be valid and while that's true, two truths can coexist at the same time. Your experience is a lived experience. That's great. That is a truth of yours. But another truth that also coexists at the same time is your duty to your ainga, that responsibility that we have, and time, that precious time. And I appreciate those gatherings, regardless of what the circumstances, because you do get to make those connections and or either strengthen them. So some bonds that may have been broken along the way, I look at it as an opportunity.
Along with financial literacy, it is about the psychology of money, the way you think about money as well, and how you're spending it. And that's something that I'm learning at the same time. So that's still something important. As much as I'm building a platform for women, I don't want to leave the sole behind. I think men are trying to find themselves as well. We have a very strong women culture, but also I do believe in the yin and yang and that we're here to balance each other out. You have this sense of yourself, and I'm sure there's men out there that are trying to find themselves. Maybe you could share what you think could help anyone who's currently lost or unsure of their path right now.
I love that, and thank you for that question. It's a very deep question and something that really hits close to home for me because let's just take culture out of it. I think it's a lot harder for men. Like for men, there's this constant questioning of your masculinity, right?
Especially men of color.
Oh, for sure, right? When I think back and as I'm doing a lot of research and reading and talking to some of the older, we didn't focus on that back in the day, right? Like that's such a colonized mentality. That's such a religious perspective. And then when we think about control of people, because we want people to act a certain way, if we truly accepted people for who they are, you are going to be who you are. But growing up in society in the 20th century, 21st century, maybe even in the 19th and 18th, your masculinity is constantly being questioned. Why are you doing that? That's not very manly. And so what does being a man or being a sole mean to every single person? It's different. Like I struggle with that almost all of my life because I felt like I had to fit into this mold, into this image of what my culture expected of me, and because that's what my parents thought and church thought that I should be. This definition of a male, like this is your responsibility, this is what you're supposed to do. So if you deviate from that in the slightest bit, then they start questioning, oi, ais whawhawhinge, oi, if you had to come out of law. And it always then becomes about your sexuality and not about your contributions. And so I think that journey that I've been on to, even with pronouns, as simple as that, I think people take the humanity out of things by not honoring people and their pronouns. If someone wants to be considered such or wants to be called such, what is it to you? Why does it matter what we feel? Like if that's what makes the other person feel great, great. If you're not harming me, if you're not doing something that's detrimental to my family, my health, my finances, then we should definitely honor because there are no accidents. So I always like to try to take a cultural approach. And when our ancestors, how did they think about what the definition of what a male is? You're coming into your own. And I'm curious. I would love to hear more about it. I wish that we had a lot more role models, but leaning into the Hawaiian side of things, I'm like, okay, look at how open they were. You know, the Aikanaka and the Mahu culture. Even back in the day, Mahu were not necessarily just this one type of people. It was healers. There were women that were called Mahu because they were the healers of the community. That question is deep, and we can spend a whole day just talking about what that path looks like. But I think it's going to be different for each individual. As a male, you will find your way. Growing up, I was always predominantly usually around the women. Why? Because I would always be where the fit hours were being done. And I was with the men, but I always gravitated towards the women because that's where the knowledge also was being shared of things that I valued. And so I think it just depends, right? If you like that kind of stuff, like go where your heart is being fed, go where your soul is being fed. but make sure that it is not detrimental to the community at large. So that would be my advice to those that are kind of coming into their own is find a space where you feel that you can be you unapologetically. What that means to be a male, what that means to be a sole, find your community. If I could write a letter to my younger self, it's stay the course. Don't listen to what anyone else has to say. They're just words. Don't give them that power. In Hawaii, it's makalelo kamake, makalelo kaola. In your words, in your tongue can give life or it can give death. My advice to anyone out there is think about what you say before you say it. My parents always said it, well, masaari puvai. You can never take back what has been uttered. In the old way, our words had power. So when you speak something, you're going to bring it to life. So don't utter things that you can never take back. I'm always mindful myself. There's certain situations where I find myself wanting to say something ignorant and I'm like, no, 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 that's not okay. Right? Taking a step back and making sure that you're also not part of the problem. So I can sit here all day long and say, well, that's wrong, that's wrong. No, how can we shift people's perspective? You cannot shift someone's perspective if you're leading with hate. Then there's also certain limits. You will reach a certain limits, and it's all up to the individual to know where you are. Like how much will you take? What's that tolerance level for you? Stress test. Finding someone that you can talk to, vent with. I've been fortunate that I've had very close family members that I can confide in. I can go to about anything and everything. The women hold a lot of mana. And that's why I'm glad that in Samoa, we held our women on a pedestal. The men were charged with all of that because we see what women mean to us. That whāngainga between a brother and sister. Your sister's the most important thing in your life. And that just really teaches us from a younger age that women are so important in our culture. Right? And you can see it across in Tonga with the fahu system. You see it in Hawaii. A lot of the women LE held mana. They actually had more mana than some of the men. To think about the very first king of Samoa was a woman, Queen Salamasina, who held all 4 titles. And so there's this whole delineation, but why? Where did gender become a thing? Gender never was a thing back in the day. It was, are you an upstanding member of society? What did you do for your family or your culture, your village, your island? It was never, are you a boy, are you a girl? You were never judged for it. And so that would be my advice.
I like that you bring that up. The reasons I was so down to have this conversation is because with Kula, it's that balance of feminine, masculine energy. And also in terms of feminine energy, it's not just women, it's men too. Like we all, estrogen, testosterone, we all have that in our bodies. There's so much that we definitely could have a conversation about. For me personally, the reason why I stand for Dear Sunga is there's still that glass ceiling for women that needs to be broken. I'm grateful for the strong women in my life. You've had some amazing strong women who helped guide you. You have definitely been a role model. So I'm super grateful for the opportunity to connect here.
Same. Oh, the pleasure is all mine. When the idea was floated around and Auntie Kawai reached out to me, I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. And then when you and I had our brief moment in talking, it's as if I've known you from a different lifetime. And it's not the first time that we've met, but it's just we're meeting each other in this lifetime or in this space or in this va. Yes, women are super important. We're shaped by them. We came from women. My mom is the number one example of who I am today. I learned not to take crap from anyone because I have my mom. Like I take on more of my dad's side where he's very quiet, but when it comes to certain situations, I channel my mom. She took no crap from anybody, man or woman. Even where she is today as a woman, she's the kaikaikiako for the Makanga Luenga. Typically, that's held by a male, but since she's done so much, after my dad's passing, she continued to retain her deacon title within the church and to be elevated to this position where women don't occupy that space. There's been men that were like, why is a woman occupying that? And it's because she can and because she's showed even more so that the Faife'au and the Kue'inga has the confidence in her. We are all surrounded by very, very strong women and couldn't be more proud.
I love the conversation, the kuven, mana, the physical realm, the spiritual realm, the whāngainga. That's what makes our cultures very beautiful. And not just Samoa, it is everywhere in the Pacific. It is very true. It is the moana that really does connect us. I hope that we as Pacific Islanders continue to have that respect for one another. So
Absolutely. Agree.
thank you so much again. I truly appreciate sharing your knowledge with us. You have such an amazing aura, and I appreciate you dearly for it. If you enjoyed this conversation and you know someone who would enjoy this episode, I hope you'll share it with them. If something resonated with you, if something made you think, or if felt familiar, I hope you can leave a comment. Always open to constructive feedback and ways that I can continue to grow Dear Sunga. I look forward to welcoming you in the next episode. So stay grounded, stay growing, stay connected with all my elephant mana. Soy Fua Maya Manuya.